So we're talking about real things here. We're trying to decipher what's really happening by speaking to people on the ground, right? So in America, when they talk about ISIS, even in the alternative media, this is how they're framing the story. And I'll give the shout out to SGT Report for this video here. We're taking this off of his video montage, which is got a lot of good information in it. But listen to this. Listen to who's pushing this ISIS narrative in Las Vegas. Listen, this is pretty amazing.
Exactly really happened in the Las Vegas shooting. The mainstream narrative continues to parrot that alleged shooter Stephen Paddock was radicalized by ISIS, which immediately took credit for the attack. That unproven storyline has even found support from alternative media sources like InfoWars' Alex Jones.
So 10, 11 days ago, on October 1st, we told you that our sources revealed to us that there were major ISIS connections to the Las Vegas shooter. Now, by Monday, it became clear from our White House sources that the national security apparatus has asked the president not to release this information because ISIS was planning this attack with codes built into it to trigger massive sleeper cell attacks across the United States that we'd even been predicting would coincide with the Antifa uprisings that are now beginning.
As readers and viewers of SGT Report now know, ISIS, a rebranding of Al-Qaeda, is little more than a CIA-created, Pentagon-funded group of mercenaries that are being used to cause destabilization throughout the Middle East, most recently in Syria, where Pentagon-backed ISIS leadership has been photographed meeting with...
Okay, so there we go. Okay, so this is what Alex Jones is pushing out to millions of people. His sources in the White House say... But this is the problem with this. Our sources, CNN does this all the time, so you don't really know what's going on there. Look, is ISIS did the Las Vegas shooting? Amazing. I don't know what to say. But something's gone wrong with the Las Vegas shooting, Mike. They haven't managed to get the narrative yet. A motive hasn't been presented. Normally, it's pretty much packaged. It comes right off the assembly line. So I just found, I'm going to throw this out. The star witness was supposed to be on Fox News. This was the security guard at the hotel that was fired on Paddock. That's supposedly the hero, right? He's gone MIA the day of his big media thing. He's now not talking to the press. Some people don't know where he is. They think he's held up at his home. He's not cooperating. He's the star witness of this case. Now he's gone missing in action. Jesus Campos is his name. And the Las Vegas Police Department have now revised the timeline. They got it wrong before. And with regards to Campos and the shooter. And also we found out CEO James Murrin, MGM Resorts, dumped 80% of his shares before October 1st. We've looked at this, and it's very possible that this is a convenient setup in order to put the direction of certain parts of the media on this guy. And he made a statement to his employees that he would match any donations to left-wing groups in the months running up to this event. And so this is something that companies do. They'll, when they do this internal political or fundraising activity, that they'll match donations to certain groups because this is what the company's values are and so forth. So this has been conflated by certain what they call patriots as including radical Islamic groups like CARE in America. And so you can see how the herd is being kind of pushed around on this story. And it seems to me like it's being pushed around in areas that are kind of various rabbit holes and tangents, and keeping people from really looking at the real story. There's also was a fake story that was put out about the special agent in charge. His name is Aaron Rouse, an FBI agent in charge of this whole investigation, that he was John Podesta's son-in-law. And this has been making the rounds all over social media and the internet. It turns out this is fake. And it's because his wife's name is the same as John Podesta's daughter's name, Megan Rouse, but it's not the same person. He's not related to Podesta. So I put this up on Facebook, and a lot of people were disappointed, obviously, because, why let the truth get in the way of a good conspiracy theory? But I just made the comment to people that, by putting stuff out and saying stuff, pushing fake rumors, you're playing into the hands of the establishment, because then they can point to that and say, more fake news, more, fake conspiracy theories. And people are doing this voluntarily because they're too lazy to actually check the information. And for me, it just took a few minutes on the search engines, and I found out it was fake. Okay. I'm not, anyone can do that.
Yep.
But anyone doesn't want to do that. This is the point. People don't want to check. And so that thing spread like wildfire. It's everywhere, Even people were dropping it in the comment because they thought that the story I posted debunking it was about Podesta's son-in-law. There's people don't even read the articles that you post.
Yeah.
So this is the behavior on social media now. So that's what's going on. And of course, this is what the mayor of Las Vegas says. This is in the forward.com. I think this is a Jewish publication. Yes, it's the world through a Jewish lens, it says, fast forward. So in the wake of the Las Vegas massacre, the city's Jewish mayor has said that she might look to Israel for ideas on how to proceed on safety and security in the future. And her name is Carolyn Goodman, and she says Israel has lived with this every single day since 1948. She's talking about the violence and the shootings and so forth. And she's talking to the Times of Israel. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. We always have safety first. We have 43 million visitors a year to Las Vegas. So Goodman is in her second term as mayor of Vegas, and she succeeded her husband, Oscar Goodman, who served 3 terms before her. And the two are among the city's most prominent Jews, says this Jewish publication, forward.com, and amongst other casino billionaire Sheldon Adelson and so forth. And so, basically she's saying that we need to be more like Israel in Las Vegas because Israel's had to live through this sort of thing since 1948. That's an interesting way of looking at it, isn't it? So, is it true? But this is in America. This is kind of where the conversation's going. America needs to be more like Israel. You see the pundits lining up on Fox. We need to talk to Israeli security, and they'll tell us how to handle this. Go ahead, Vanessa. I think you want to say something.
I think that's kind of fascinating. If you actually look at. There was a report in Zero Hedge, but it was picked up by Mint Press, of the fact that actually ISIS are setting up training centers along the border with Israel. And it's actually been reported by Israel's own Channel 2, who have produced video and photographic evidence of what's being described as training and recruitment centers, which have already attracted hundreds of new terror recruits. Alongside the border, on the Golan Heights border with Israel. So it's kind of ironic if the Israeli security services are being promoted as the ultimate in security to protect them against what is an ISIS attack. By the way, was the ISIS video put out by Site Intel by any chance, or was it?
we think it was. Yeah, right. The initial claim was by Site. But
how convenient. Yeah. But isn't this extraordinary? I mean, this is just pure irony. I mean, you couldn't get any more ridiculous than this to some extent. America is one. We know it's been entertaining Al-Qaeda affiliates in the white helmets, bringing them to New York to meet with the very first responders that were involved in saving lives at 9/11, and are now being put in a position where they are meeting and greeting Al-Qaeda affiliates under the guise of the white helmets. Bana Alabed, who's been also brought to New York as a sort of another face of Syria, whose entire family is working for and collaborating with and are members of Al-Qaeda and various other extremist factions inside East Aleppo. Her father was a Sharia court judge, so he was determining who among the Syrian civilians under occupation by Nusra Front in East Aleppo were to be executed or tortured or imprisoned or kidnapped.
Nice.
And so, and his entire family were members of the founding, if you like, the founding extremists that invaded East Aleppo in 2012, 2013. So, this unbelievable parody is continuing in the sense that now they're saying there has been an ISIS attack in Vegas. And guess who they go to for security? Israel. While Israel is fostering terrorism inside Syria and allowing, last November they say Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his country won't allow Islamic State figures or other enemy actors under the cover of the war in Syria to set up next to our borders. But guess what?
They did.
Yeah.
And not only that, Israel was treating al-Nusra fighters in Israeli hospitals.
And helping them against Syrian army attacks.
That was reported in the Israeli press, by the way. It's not a conspiracy theory. So I'm going to ask all our great journalists at The Guardian, don't you think that's a good story? Is that worth looking into? Do you think there's a scoop there? That's kind of a big deal, isn't it? Don't you think?
Well, I mean, you would think so.
But what they're interested in is this. She's on her book tour in America with probably the Blair Partnership PR company setting up all these meetings and all these media spots. Bana Alabed, Bana of Aleppo, is basically doing meeting kids in schools, celebrities. She's doing the whole thing. Bana Does America is what we're going to unofficially call this. And listen to this.
I am very sad. The education is very important. Many children can't go to school because of the war and the hunger. I support the UN global goals. And I wish that the children, girls and boys around the world can go to school again and know how to write and read. And we should help the children and support them for a better tomorrow.
What's the difference between that and a well-trained chimp at the London Zoo? I mean, that's all she's being trained to do tricks. Basically, she doesn't understand what she's reading there.
What age is Bana now?
8.
So this is purely speculative, but I would imagine our listeners can make a decision for themselves. How many 8-year-olds understand what the Millennium Goals are?
The UN Global Goals, 2030 Agenda. How many 8-year-olds understand that and can contextualize that in a global governance framework?
This is obviously a super child.
She's reading off cue cards. Okay. This is just the biggest fraud you can imagine. This is so disgusting.
Is this not child abuse?
It is. Yeah. It's worse than child abuse because it's weaponizing this child for a political agenda, and it's being done by the West. Okay, but this is not a banana republic countries doing this. This is the U.S. and the U.K. are doing this. That's who's doing it, and the corporations who are making millions off of the book. Millions. They're promoting that book right now. They should all be ashamed of themselves. Every single person who's involved in this should be ashamed. This is the lowest I've ever seen. Unbelievable.
But it's for a political agenda. I mean, let's look at who is producing this political agenda, right? The UN Security Council. If we're talking about the UN policy, global policy. So the UN Security Council, France, the UK, and America, who are effectively facilitating the starvation, the deprivation of tens of thousands of children in Yemen, if not millions. The bombing, the daily bombing of those children in Yemen. They are infiltrating Syria with terrorist proxies. The US coalition has carpet bombed Raqqa and areas of Deir ez-Zor, murdering and massacring civilians, targeting schools. The terrorist proxies controlled by our governments and effectively supported and promoted by the UN in their global policy have occupied schools in both Mosul, so in Iraq and in Syria, used them as military centers, torture chambers, right? So where is the global policy from the UN to bring peace and aid and genuine education to these children. It doesn't exist. So what is Bana promoting? She's promoting the continuum of war, because it is that keeps the wheels turning in these halls of so-called justice and in the political apparatus of our governments. So you're right. It's beyond child abuse. It's beyond exploitation, because the ramifications of what they are doing with Bana is they are using her to effectively bring about the destruction of education, of children, of their entire infrastructure, of their way of life, of their culture, of their history, of their civilization.
Breaking it down, basically. Well, she's playing her role. She's acting. She's playing her role, and she's doing what she's told, and supposedly probably getting rewarded for it. How else do you get an 8-year-old to do things like this? They're not doing it by free will.
Yeah.
They're not doing it on their fear. Well, this is an interesting little element there. What's going on behind the scenes with Bana?
Look, her family were terrorists. I'm quite sure they had no qualms about the imprisonment, the mistreatment, the further exploitation of children in East Aleppo. I interviewed...
So long as it served their agenda, yeah.
I interviewed Fatima, the mother's uncle, in Aleppo. And what he told me was actually sort of quite disturbing for me, was that he said in December there were a series of tweets being put out by Fatima and Bana asking whether they could get from East Aleppo into West Aleppo. And he said at that point he had a phone conversation with Fatima, and he said, look, the government will not punish you for what you've done. You can leave safely. You can come to West Aleppo and you can be back with the family. And at that point, he said it was just basically radio silence, and the next thing he knew, they were in Turkey. So all of this is speculation, because it's impossible to discover what actually really happened. But I know also from speaking to the neighbors that early on in the conflict, so around 2011, 2012, Fatima was not veiled. In other words, she was not wearing the full niqab and covering her face. I mean, she isn't now either. But they said gradually she became more and more reclusive and fundamental in her religion also. So, what pressure has been brought to bear maybe on her? Her family were actually Baathists. So, to a huge extent, she had betrayed her own family ethics and politics in a sense in being with Hassan Alabed, who was clearly, or certainly clearly joined the extremist factions very early on in the conflict from 2012, 2013. And then we know he was repairing weapons for them. He was acting as Sharia court judge. So he was working and collaborating very closely with them. His great ambition was to get to Turkey and to meet Erdogan. He told all of his neighbors this. This was his sole ambition. And he's achieved it.
Yeah.
So, to what extent is this child being put under pressure, not only by Western propagandists and PR agencies who are using her to perception nudge people towards probably even more war, but to what extent is she being put under pressure by her own family? We don't know. Mm-hmm. But however we look at it, children do only do things pretty much, I would say, for those two reasons, for reward or out of fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's kind of obvious looking at, if you really look at the material, what Bana is and what this all is all about. But, most people aren't looking at the material. Certainly, all the editors of these newspapers and these broadcast outlets, you're just completely derelict in your job. And quite frankly, and I'll say this publicly, anytime, you have no business being in journalism or media. You should be, anyone who condones that, who promotes that, should be kept away from media and journalism, because you're promoting child exploitation. It's on a geopolitical scale. Okay, This is a high crime. This is a historic crime. When the penny drops on this poor girl, what's in store for this girl in the future? You saw the young Omran, this boy who was also used by the media, and that's the difficult thing for him when he grows up to see that. He'll have to process that, Yeah. He might stand a better chance because he's in a better environment. Maybe his family's they're not manipulating him. But this young girl, Bana, she's being completely manipulated by teams of people, by corporations, by Simon & Schuster, big publisher, by big PR companies, the Blair Partnership, by J.K. Rowling, one of the richest women in the world. They're using this child for some reason, and for the life of me, I can't believe they think they're going to get away with it. In the end,
it's sort of extraordinary. I think what we're seeing is we're on. We've said this before. We're almost on two parallel dimensions. We're on the one where the fact and the evidence is being examined and analysed, and conclusions we're arriving at conclusions that make sense based on that evidence and fact. And then on the other track, it's almost like a juggernaut that's lost its brakes, but it just keeps growing. It's like with the white helmets, they keep promoting them. They keep refusing to accept that there is any doubt over the true intent of this organisation. With Bana, it's like they can't backtrack. I don't know where this goes. I mean, I don't know, Mike, if you've got any ideas on this, because I just don't see. It's almost like they have to keep going until they absolutely hit the brick wall. Because
I'll tell you where it's going.